Have you ever locked eyes with someone from your past, and in just one breath, your entire world changed? Daniel Whitmore thought he had everything: wealth, reputation, control, but all of it crumbled the moment he saw her, Amelia, at the airport, holding a child that looked exactly like him. 3 years, no contact, no answers, and now this. What would you do if the love of your life vanished, only to return with a secret that shatters the life you built? Would you forgive or fight, walk away or risk everything? This isn't just a story about betrayal. It's a story about what happens after the silence, about the weight of choices, the cost of pride, and the healing power of truth. If you've ever lost someone you loved, if you've ever wished for a second chance but were afraid to reach for it, this story is for you. Grab a quiet moment. Let your heart open. Like, share, and subscribe to our channel to follow this unforgettable journey. Now, let's begin. A millionaire sees his ex with a baby at the airport. Days later, she searches for him through tears. The airport was unusually crowded that late Thursday afternoon. Travelers rushed through terminals, rolling their suitcases, chasing flights, or sipping overpriced coffee while waiting for delayed departures. But for Daniel Whitmore, time came to a halt near Gate 23. He hadn't planned on flying that day. A business meeting in Chicago had been rescheduled last minute, and instead of going back to his downtown Seattle penthouse, he decided to spend a few quiet hours at the airport lounge, sorting through emails, a small, unplanned detour in an otherwise perfectly structured life. He was standing in line at a coffee kiosk when something, or someone, caught his eye across the terminal. At first, it was just a woman in a beige coat, holding a child in her arms. Nothing remarkable. But there was something about the way she carried herself, quick steps, like she was hoping not to be seen. Her hair was pulled back loosely, strands escaping at the temples. The little boy rested his head on her shoulder, wrapped in a navy blue jacket. Then she turned. Daniel's heart stopped. It couldn't be Amelia? The name didn't even reach his lips. It only echoed inside his chest. She hadn't changed much. Her face was thinner, maybe, and her eyes more cautious. But it was her, Amelia Hart, the woman he had loved fiercely, the woman who had walked away 3 years ago without a word of explanation, vanished like smoke. No note, no call, just gone. And now, there she was, holding a child who Daniel's breath caught had the same ice-blue eyes he saw in the mirror every morning. The boy turned his head lazily, drowsy, unaware of what his small face was about to shatter inside a man's heart. Daniel's world tilted. He stepped forward instinctively, his voice catching in his throat. Amelia. But the noise of the terminal swallowed the sound. She looked up, just briefly, and their eyes met. It lasted less than a second, yet in that second, everything returned: the weight of unspoken words, the ache of abandonment, and now the deep, sudden pull of something new, something terrifying. She looked away, turned her back, and disappeared into the crowd. Daniel moved fast. He didn't remember pushing through people or sidestepping luggage carts. His heart pounded in his ears. He reached the spot where she had been just moments ago, but she was gone. He turned in circles, searching. Nothing. Only the distant announcements of departing flights and the dull ache blooming in his chest. His hands trembled as he sat on a nearby bench. For a long moment he said nothing, but inside, his mind screamed, "That boy had my eyes." He leaned forward, elbows on knees, breath uneven. What had just happened? The question would follow him for days, like a thread tugging at the edge of his well-kept world. That brief, silent second at the airport had undone 3 years of carefully arranged distance. He knew one thing for certain. He wasn't letting Amelia vanish again. Not this time. Daniel didn't go home that night. Instead, he drove for hours, letting the hum of the highway soothe what no silence could. The city lights faded behind him, replaced by long stretches of dark roads and gas stations glowing like lonely lanterns in the night. 3 years. That's how long it had been since Amelia disappeared. It wasn't just the absence of her presence that haunted him. It was the complete lack of reason. She hadn't left in anger. There hadn't been a final fight. No accusations, no slammed doors. Just a text. "I'm sorry. I can't do this anymore." That was all she wrote. He'd stared at that message for days, then weeks, as if reading it enough times might make it make sense. It never did. At first, he'd told himself she needed space. Maybe she was overwhelmed. Maybe she'd come back. He tried calling. The number was disconnected. He tried friends, co-workers. Nothing. No one knew where she had gone. She'd vanished completely, leaving no trail, like she never existed. And now she had reappeared at a crowded airport with a child. Daniel finally pulled into the underground garage of his building just after midnight. The valet gave him a curious glance, but didn't say anything. He took the elevator up to his penthouse in silence. The apartment was immaculate. Floor-to-ceiling windows looked out over the Seattle skyline, city lights blinking like distant promises. But inside, it felt cold, sterile, like a showroom, a life carefully arranged, but empty at the core. He poured himself a drink and stood by the window. The whiskey burned as it went down. She looked the same, he thought, just tired, older. His eyes lingered on the night. Somewhere out there, she was with that boy, their boy. The possibility slammed into him again. He had always wanted children, quietly, perhaps even secretly. It wasn't something he told his business partners or board members. It wasn't something that fit neatly into investor meetings or earnings calls. But deep down, he had imagined it bedtime stories, baseball games, small shoes in the hallway. And now, he might have missed all of it, the first word, the first step, the first scraped knee, all gone. He gripped the edge of the window frame until his knuckles turned white. The next morning, Daniel didn't go into the office. His assistant, Claire, called twice. He ignored both. Instead, he sat at the grand piano in the corner of his living room, a gift from a friend he never played. Today, his fingers moved slowly across the keys, not playing anything specific. Just noise. Just memory. His mind drifted back to the day they met. Amelia had been a nurse then, working at a charity health clinic where Daniel had anonymously donated some equipment. He'd shown up unannounced for a site visit, and she had mistaken him for a maintenance worker. He still remembered how her brow furrowed as she handed him a mop and asked him to clean up a spill near the waiting room. He hadn't corrected her. He liked watching her work steady hands, kind eyes, a quiet confidence that didn't need attention. Later, when she realized who he was, she'd gone red with embarrassment. He'd laughed. So had she. That laugh. It had been the first thing he noticed, and the last thing he missed. Daniel stood and paced. He didn't like this version of himself, restless, out of control, but he also couldn't ignore the gnawing voice in his chest. You need to find her. He sat at his desk, opened his laptop, and began searching. Social media, online directories, medical boards, nothing. He paused, then typed in how to find someone who doesn't want to be found. He didn't press enter. That evening, he called the one person who might understand. Mark, he said, as soon as his best friend picked up. Mark Thompson had been with Daniel since college, business partner, co-founder of their investment firm, and one of the few people who knew the truth about Amelia. I saw her, Daniel said, his voice flat. There was silence on the other end. What? At the airport. Yesterday. You're sure? Daniel stared at the glass in his hand. She was holding a kid, a boy. Mark swore softly, and he looked like me. Another pause. Jesus. Daniel rubbed his forehead. I don't know what to do. You do, Mark said. You've always known. You just didn't want to admit it. Daniel didn't respond. Find her. Mark continued. Whatever it takes. If that boy is yours, you've already lost enough time. Daniel didn't sleep that night either. The boy's face haunted him. Those pale blue eyes, the same shade his grandmother used to say were the color of a winter lake. His eyes, his blood. If it was true, he had a son, and no matter what it cost, he needed to know. 2 days after the airport encounter, Daniel Whitmore stood in front of a wall of paper maps in a dusty bookstore just outside of Seattle. It was the kind of place that smelled of old bindings and forgotten time, not the sleek digital spaces he was used to. But that was exactly why he was there. He was looking for something analog, something real, because Amelia Hart didn't exist online. He had tried. Every tool, every connection, every resource a man with his wealth could leverage, he used them all. No address, no license renewals, no recent employment records. It was like she had erased herself from every database, almost buried in an archived nursing registry. Daniel found a trace. A temporary license issued under her maiden name, tied to a clinic in a town he'd never heard of, Lakewood Ridge, Oregon. It was enough. Now, holding a map in his hand, tracing the route with his thumb, he made a decision. He folded the map, paid in cash, and left. The next morning, Daniel packed light 2 shirts, a pair of jeans, shaving kit, and an old photo of him and Amelia laughing on a beach, back when things were easy, before silence and questions and children with eyes that matched his. He drove the 6 hours south on I-5, the landscape shifting from city to forest, from concrete to open sky. The further he got from Seattle, the more the noise in his mind quieted, or perhaps it just changed. What will I say if I find her? He didn't know. Lakewood Ridge wasn't on most maps. It wasn't even on his car's GPS. The town emerged from a bend in the road like a secret, tucked between hills and pine trees. A white steeple, a diner, a post office, a grocery store with old wooden crates stacked outside. It was the kind of place where people didn't just know your name, They remembered what kind of coffee you drank and how your dad took his eggs. Daniel parked outside a modest cafe called Martha's, the kind of place that looked like it hadn't changed its wallpaper since 1973. The bell over the door jingled as he stepped inside. A waitress in her 50s looked up from behind the counter. She eyed him not with suspicion, but with curiosity. Strangers didn't walk in often. "Help you with something?" she asked. Daniel hesitated, then reached into his jacket and pulled out the photo. He'd cropped himself out of it. Only Amelia remained, her face lit by sunlight, hair tangled by wind, laughing at something long forgotten. "Have you seen her?" he asked, setting the picture on the counter. The woman leaned in, squinted. Then, slowly, her brows knit together. "I think so," she said. "She comes in sometimes?" "With a little boy." Daniel's heart kicked. "Do you know where she lives?" The woman shook her head. "No, but she usually comes around lunch." He looked at the clock. 11:43. "I'll wait." At 12:08, the bell jingled again. She stepped in, holding the boy's hand. Amelia wore a soft gray cardigan over jeans. Her hair was longer now, pulled into a simple braid. The boy Ben looked up at her, chattering about something she didn't seem to hear. Her eyes scanned the room automatically, alert, cautious. Then she saw him. Her steps stopped, her mouth parted. For a second, no one moved. Daniel rose slowly from the booth, hands loose at his sides. "What are you doing here?" she asked, her voice low, almost a whisper. He didn't answer her right away. He looked at Ben. The boy blinked up at him, curious. Daniel's voice was calm, but edged with tension. "I think you know why." Amelia glanced around. The other patrons watched in muted interest. "Not here," she said quickly. Daniel nodded. "Where then?" She hesitated. "Follow me." Her house was small, tucked behind a row of trees, barely visible from the main road. There was a bicycle on the porch, a pair of tiny shoes by the door. Inside, it smelled like cinnamon and clean laundry. Ben fell asleep quickly on the couch, hugging a stuffed raccoon. Daniel stood near the window, arms crossed. Amelia didn't sit. "I didn't expect to see you," she said quietly. "I didn't expect to see you disappear." She closed her eyes for a moment. "You have questions," she said. "I saw the boy," Daniel replied. "That's not a question." She turned her back to him, looking at the small living room, the toys neatly arranged, the quiet domestic life she had built. "Why didn't you tell me?" he asked. His voice cracked on the edge of restraint. She didn't answer right away. Then, softly, "Because I was afraid." The silence in the room felt like another person watching, waiting, breathing with them. Daniel stood by the window, staring out at nothing behind him. Amelia paced slowly across the small kitchen, arms folded tight across her chest, like she was trying to keep herself from unraveling. "I should have told you," she finally said. Daniel didn't answer, his jaw tensed, eyes fixed on a spot just beyond the trees. Amelia turned to him. "I know what you're thinking." He laughed quietly, but it wasn't warm. "Do you?" She stepped closer, not too close. "You're angry, confused, and you should be. I disappeared. I kept him from you." Daniel turned then, slow and deliberate, eyes locking with hers. Why, she swallowed hard. "It's not a simple answer. I don't need simple. I need truth." Amelia looked down at the floor. then at the couch where Ben slept peacefully, one arm draped over his stuffed raccoon. Her voice, when it came, was so quiet he almost didn't hear it. "Your mother came to see me before I left." Daniel's face changed just slightly, but enough. A flicker of something darker passed behind his eyes. "She said you'd moved on, that you were seeing someone else, that I was just a phase, an inconvenience." His voice was sharp now. "And you believed her?" "No," she said quickly. "Not at first. But she knew things, personal things. She knew how scared I was, about being pregnant, about not knowing if I was ready. She used all of it." Daniel stepped forward. "Why didn't you come to me? I tried." She said, "I called, texted, but she got to you first. She told me you didn't want to talk, that I was embarrassing myself. She offered money, told me to disappear quietly, and that I'd be doing you a favor." Daniel's hands were shaking now. He turned away, fists clenched. "I didn't take the money," Amelia said, her voice trembling. "But I did leave, because I believed maybe I wasn't strong enough to stay." A long pause followed. Daniel breathed deeply, trying to gather the storm inside him. "She took 3 years from me," he said, his voice low. "3 years I can never get back." "I know," Amelia whispered. He turned, slowly, toward the small sleeping figure on the couch. "His name Ben," she said. "Is he mine?" Amelia didn't hesitate. "Yes." The word landed like a weight in Daniel's chest. Heavy, final, irrevocable. He sat down, suddenly unsteady, and put his head in his hands. Ben, his son, his blood. He remembered the curve of the boy's cheek, the pale blue of his eyes that mirrored his own. He had missed it all. First words, first steps, first fevers in the night, first laughs, first tears, first everything. "Why now?" he asked without lifting his head. "Why show up at the airport? I didn't mean to." She said, "I wasn't there to find you. We were passing through, just a connection flight. I saw you before you saw me." And I panicked. Daniel looked up. "Because you knew." "Yes," she admitted. "Because I knew that look. The moment our eyes met, I knew you recognized him." Silence fell again, thick with all the things they didn't know how to say. "I never wanted to hurt you," Amelia said. He looked at her, and for the first time, his eyes softened, not with forgiveness, not yet, but with recognition. "I know," he said. "But you did." Amelia nodded. "I know that too." Later, as night fell over the little house, they sat across from each other in the living room. Ben was still asleep, curled beneath a soft knit blanket. "I don't know what to do with this," Daniel confessed. "I've never been a father. I don't even know where to start." "You don't have to know everything," Amelia said quietly. "You just have to show up." He looked at her, unsure. "Would you let me?" Amelia's voice caught slightly. "I'm scared," she admitted. "Not of you, just of losing the little peace I've managed to build." "I don't want to ruin your peace," Daniel said. "I just want to be in his life." "I need that." She didn't answer right away. Then slowly, with eyes full of conflicted memory and maybe something more, she nodded. "Then start by being here." Daniel leaned back in the chair, staring again at the boy who had his eyes and a piece of his heart he didn't know was missing. It wasn't forgiveness, it wasn't healing, but it was a beginning. The next morning brought no grand revelations, no dramatic apologies, just the soft smell of coffee drifting through the kitchen and the faint creak of old floorboards beneath tired feet. Daniel awoke on the couch, still wearing yesterday's shirt. A folded blanket lay across his chest, placed there sometime during the night. The early light spilled through the blinds, casting long stripes across the living room. He sat up slowly, rubbing the sleep from his eyes. From the kitchen, he heard Amelia humming. A simple tune. Something familiar. Something he hadn't realized he missed. She didn't look at him when he entered. Her hands moved calmly, cracking eggs, stirring gently. She wore an old sweatshirt, her hair tied up without care. This wasn't the Amelia from his memories. This was a woman who had learned to live alone, learned to carry the weight quietly. Daniel sat at the small table and waited. A minute passed before she spoke. "You still take your coffee black?" He hesitated. "Yeah." She poured him a cup and placed it in front of him, without a word. They sat like that for a while. Two people who had once known each other deeply, and now weren't sure how to breathe in the same room. "I keep thinking about all the things I missed," Daniel said finally. Amelia didn't respond. He looked at her carefully. "Do you ever think about it every day?" Her voice didn't tremble, but something in her posture shifted. "I thought I was doing the right thing," she continued. "At least at first. When I left, I didn't plan to hide forever. I thought you'd find me, that maybe you'd fight for it." But then nothing came. No calls, no letters. "I figured your mother had been right." Daniel stared into his coffee. "She never told me you reached out." Amelia gave a small, bitter smile. "I figured." He looked up at her, his voice more quiet now. "She kept me from knowing. She stole time from us, from me and from Ben." Amelia took a deep breath and leaned against the counter. "She didn't have to try that hard. You were busy, important. You always had something going on. That's not fair. I know," she admitted, "but it's how I felt. Back then, I was just trying to survive." Daniel stood and walked to the window. Outside, Ben ran barefoot in the yard, chasing a butterfly, his laughter piercing the still morning air. "He's so small," Daniel whispered. "He just turned 3. I missed everything." Amelia's voice was soft. "You can still have something, if you want it." He turned to face her. "You're not afraid I'll leave again?" She didn't flinch. "I'm afraid of everything." That stopped him. "I'm afraid he'll love you, and you'll get tired, that you'll go back to your real life, and we'll be the past again. I'm afraid you'll get angry, or overwhelmed, or bored. I'm afraid that letting you stay means I'm giving him another chance to be broken." Her words filled the space between them like fog. Daniel stepped forward. "And what about you? What about me?" she asked, voice tighter now. "Are you afraid of letting me love you again?" Amelia looked away, and when she spoke again, her voice was barely audible. "I'm afraid I'll want it too much." The air between them held something raw, not romance, not yet, just the recognition of damage, still healing. Daniel didn't press her. He didn't reach for her hand or try to hold her gaze. He simply stood there, letting her words settle. "I want to be here," he said, "for Ben, for you, but I know I have to earn that." She didn't respond, and that silence, strangely, felt like the most honest answer of all. Later that afternoon, Daniel sat on the porch while Ben played in a patch of sunlight with plastic dinosaurs. He watched the boy move awkward, joyful, alive. It was strange, seeing yourself reflected in someone so small. Ben looked up suddenly. "Are you my mom's friend?" he asked. Daniel smiled faintly. "Something like that." Ben tilted his head. "You look like me." Daniel chuckled, more from surprise than amusement. "Maybe I do." The boy thought for a moment, then nodded. "Okay." And just like that, he went back to his dinosaurs. Daniel leaned back against the porch post, his heart a confusing mix of ache and awe. How easy it was for children to accept, how hard it was for adults to forgive. That evening, as the sun dipped low and the sky turned golden, Amelia came to stand beside him. "He likes you," she said softly. Daniel nodded. "I like him too." She didn't say anything for a long time. Then, almost too quiet to hear, "I don't know how to do this." "Neither do I," he replied. "But I think we can figure it out." She looked at him then, not with certainty, not even with hope, but with something real, and that was enough for now. The knock came just after noon. Amelia was folding laundry in the living room, Daniel reading quietly by the window. Ben was napping, his small frame curled like a comma on the couch. The sound was soft but firm, intentional. Daniel and Amelia exchanged a glance. She stood first, wiping her hands on her jeans before walking to the door. When she opened it, her breath caught. Evelyn Whitmore stood on the porch, tall, polished, and impossibly composed. Evelyn looked like she'd stepped out of a country club luncheon and into a world she didn't belong to. Her pearl earrings glinted in the sunlight, her tailored coat far too pristine for the dusty gravel road. Amelia's grip tightened on the door. "Evelyn," she said, her voice clipped. "Amelia," Evelyn replied, her smile sharp enough to cut glass. Daniel appeared behind Amelia, his hand resting lightly on the doorframe. "Mother," he said. Evelyn turned to him, her expression softening a fraction. "I see you found her. I didn't need your help." Evelyn's eyes drifted past him to the child's shoes near the door. Clearly, Amelia stepped forward slightly. "What are you doing here?" Evelyn folded her hands. "I came to talk, privately, with both of us," Daniel said firmly. Evelyn hesitated, then inclined her head. "Very well." They sat at the small table in the kitchen. Evelyn didn't touch the coffee Amelia offered, but looked around the modest home with barely hidden disdain. "This isn't a place for a Whitmore," she said finally. Daniel leaned forward. "He's not a Whitmore. He's Ben, and he's happy here." Evelyn's smile was tight. For now, Amelia's shoulders stiffened. "I'm not here to argue," Evelyn continued. "I'm here to make things easier." Daniel laughed once short, bitter. "For you, for all of us," she said calmly. "Daniel, you have a reputation, a company, a public image to maintain. This situation complicates things." He stared at her, disbelief rising. "Are you serious?" She turned to Amelia. "And you, my dear, have no legal claim. You left without informing the father. That's abandonment. It could be viewed very unfavorably in court." "I did what I had to do," Amelia said through clenched teeth. Evelyn didn't blink. "But the law doesn't care about your reasons. It cares about facts. And the fact is, you kept a child from his father. That will not work in your favor." Daniel slammed his hand against the table. "Stop talking like this is a negotiation." "It's not," Evelyn replied coldly. It's a reality. Silence. Then Amelia stood. You want custody? Evelyn gave a small nod. Joint at first, supervised, then full. Daniel stood too, now towering over his mother, over my dead body. Evelyn's tone didn't change. If you're not willing to take responsibility, I will. I am taking responsibility, he snapped, by being here, by showing up. You don't get to use my son as a pawn in your power games. He's not just your son, Evelyn said. He's a Whitmore. He deserves better than this. Little life. Amelia's voice rose for the first time, sharp and furious. This little life is all he's ever known, and he's happy. He's safe. Don't you dare pretend this is about him. Daniel turned to his mother, voice low but dangerous. You do anything to hurt her or Ben, and I swear, I'll burn every bridge we have. Evelyn met his gaze. Then I suppose we'll see each other in court. She left without another word. When the door closed, Amelia collapsed into a chair. Daniel stood motionless for a long moment, then walked to the sink and splashed water on his face. She's bluffing, he said, more to himself than to her. No, Amelia whispered. She's not. 3 days later, the papers arrived. A legal petition. Evelyn Whitmore v. Amelia Hart and Daniel Whitmore. Motion for immediate custody review. Daniel stared at the envelope, his jaw set. She's really doing it. Amelia sat beside him, her hands trembling slightly. She's going to take him from me. No, he said. She won't. She's powerful. Daniel, rich, connected. She'll twist the truth until it looks like I'm the one who's unstable. Daniel didn't speak. He reached for his phone and dialed. Mark, he said when the line picked up. I need your best lawyer. Family law, today, that night. Daniel stood outside the house, staring into the dark. He could feel it again, the slow swell of anger, of betrayal, of something primal, not just for himself, for Ben, his son. He had been stolen from once. He wouldn't let it happen again. This time, he would fight. Ben had never seen a man tie a necktie before. He watched curiously from the hallway, a small dinosaur clutched in one hand, as Daniel struggled with the silk strip of fabric in the mirror. The boy tilted his head, squinting slightly, mimicking Daniel's every move with the dinosaur's tiny arms. Daniel chuckled, catching the reflection behind him. You mocking me, little man? Ben grinned. What's that for? It's a tie, Daniel replied. I have a meeting today. Ben stepped closer. You don't look like someone who wears those. Daniel paused, then crouched to Ben's level. No, you look like someone who plays in the dirt. Daniel laughed softly. Guess that's what happens when you hang around a dinosaur expert. Ben puffed his chest slightly. I know 27 dinosaurs. Want me to name them? I believe you, Daniel said, ruffling the boy's hair. But I need you to do me a favor instead. Ben nodded solemnly. What is it? Keep an eye on your mom while I'm gone. Ben smiled. Easy. Daniel left that morning to meet with his new legal team. But his mind never strayed far from the house, from the boy with bright eyes and boundless questions, from the quiet woman trying to keep it all from falling apart. The lawyer, a sharp woman named Marissa Kane, reviewed the case quickly. Your mother's team is building a narrative, she said, that Amelia is unstable, isolated, unfit to provide a proper environment. Daniel's fists clenched. And me. They're saying you're complicit, that you're emotionally erratic and financially distracted, that you can't provide a structured home. Daniel leaned back in the chair. They're not wrong about one thing: I've never had a structured home. My mother made sure of that. Marissa's eyes narrowed. Are you willing to fight her publicly, yes? Even if it means exposing family secrets? Daniel's jaw tightened, especially then. That evening, Daniel returned just as the sun began to slip behind the hills. The house was quiet. Amelia was finishing dishes in the kitchen, her movements tired. Routine. He asked about you, she said softly. Daniel took off his jacket. Yeah, he wanted to know if you'd be back for bedtime. Daniel smiled faintly. Wasn't planning to miss it. He found Ben in the small room they'd set up as a play corner, tiny bookshelves, a beanbag chair, crayons scattered like leaves across the carpet. Ben looked up from a drawing. You came back. Of course I did. Ben crawled into his lap without hesitation, holding up a crayon-streaked paper. This is us, you, me, and Mom. See, I gave you long arms so you can hug better. Daniel's throat tightened. That's really good. He managed. Mom says you might stay forever. Daniel looked down at him. Would you be okay with that? Ben thought for a moment. I think so, but only if you learn how to make pancakes. Daniel laughed. Deal. Over the next few days, Daniel stayed. He took Ben to the park, learning to push a swing just right. He helped him build a cardboard spaceship, complete with painted stars and plastic bottle engines. He learned the difference between a stegosaurus and an ankylosaurus. He also learned that bedtime was sacred. Each night, Ben chose a book, sometimes dinosaurs, sometimes stories about space. Sometimes he just wanted to talk. Do you have a dad? Ben asked one night. Daniel hesitated. I did, a long time ago. Where is he? Daniel looked at the ceiling. He passed away when I was little. Ben was quiet for a moment. Was he nice? I think so. I don't remember much. But I try to be someone he'd be proud of. Ben nodded. I think he'd like you. Daniel swallowed hard. Thanks, buddy. Ben looked up. Will you stay until I'm big? Daniel pulled the blanket up gently. I'll stay as long as you want me. Okay, Ben whispered. Forever then. Outside the room, Amelia stood in the hallway, back pressed to the wall, listening. She felt something shift inside her, equal parts relief and fear. She wasn't sure which one would win. The night air was cool, carrying the scent of pine and the distant hum of insects. Amelia stepped out onto the back porch, her sweater pulled tight around her. She needed the silence, the space, inside. Ben was finally asleep. Daniel had read to him twice until the boy's breathing evened out and his small fists relaxed against the sheets. She heard the creak of the screen door a moment later and didn't have to turn around to know it was him. Daniel joined her without speaking. They stood side by side in the quiet, watching the stars appear one by one above the trees. He glanced at her. You always come out here when you need to think. She nodded, eyes still on the sky. It's easier to breathe out here. He hesitated. You've been quiet all day. I've had a lot on my mind. Daniel waited, sensing there was more. Finally, she turned to face him. I see how Ben looks at you, she said softly. Like he's known you forever. Like he trusts you completely. And it scares me. Daniel's brows furrowed. Why? Because he didn't have that before. And now that he does, I'm terrified it could disappear." He didn't respond immediately. When he did, his voice was gentle. "I'm not planning to disappear, Amelia, but you might," she said quickly. "Life happens. People change. Promises don't always hold. I'm not making promises I can't keep." She looked down, her voice barely above a whisper. "I think you already have." Daniel stepped closer, but didn't reach for her. "I get it," he said. "You're scared. So am I. I'm scared of screwing this up, of not being enough for him, for you. But I'm still here." Amelia's hands tightened around the edge of her sweater. "And if one day you wake up and realize this isn't the life you want, what happens then? What happens to Ben? I fight harder," he said without missing a beat. She looked at him, eyes brimming now. "You say that like it's easy. It's not. But it's real." The silence grew heavy again, pressing between them. Then, almost too quietly to hear, she said, "I don't know how to trust you." Daniel didn't flinch. He nodded slowly. "Then tell me how to earn it." Amelia blinked, caught off guard by the steadiness in his voice. "I don't know," she whispered. Daniel exhaled. "That's okay. I'll wait." She shook her head, frustrated. "You don't get it. This isn't about time. It's about what time does. It builds hope, and then sometimes it breaks it. I'm not him, Amelia." "I know that," she said quickly. "But you've been alone so long," he continued. "You've built this world where no one else gets in. And now I'm standing here, asking to be part of it. And you're terrified that if you open the door, it'll all fall apart." She wiped at her eyes, angry at the tears she couldn't stop. "I can't be broken again," she said. Daniel's voice dropped. "Neither can I." They stood there, staring at each other, every unspoken feeling shimmering just beneath the surface. The wind rustled the leaves. Somewhere in the distance, a dog barked. Life went on, indifferent to their silence. Then Amelia did something she hadn't done in years. She stepped forward, just slightly, just enough, not into his arms, not into something she couldn't control, but into a space that meant, "I'm not running." Daniel understood. He didn't try to close the distance. He didn't reach for her. He just nodded, barely. And for them, for now, that was everything. The next morning, things felt different. Not lighter, but less brittle. Ben ran to Daniel when he saw him, arms open. Daniel scooped him up with ease, both laughing as if the night before had never happened. Amelia watched from the hallway, something aching in her chest. This was what she feared most, that they would become a unit, that they would feel like a family. That love would return in the softest, most irresistible ways, and that one day it might be taken away again. She pressed her hand to her heart. "I want to believe," she whispered to herself. The courthouse in the county seat was an aging brick building with narrow windows and a flag that whipped in the wind like it had something to prove. Daniel Whitmore had been in boardrooms, conference halls, even live interviews with investors breathing down his neck. But nothing felt quite like this. He wore a tailored navy suit, but he didn't feel powerful. Amelia Hart sat beside him, her palms damp with nerves. She kept glancing at the door, half expecting someone to pull her out of this waking nightmare. Across the aisle sat Evelyn Whitmore, poised in a cream-colored blazer, flanked by her attorneys. She looked like she was there to close a merger, not to rip a child from his mother. Daniel leaned toward Amelia, Whatever happens, we stay calm." Amelia gave a tight nod. "I'm trying." The judge entered a woman in her late 50s with kind but sharp eyes. The courtroom rose, then settled. The proceedings began. Evelyn's lawyer was strategic, polished, and merciless. He painted a picture of Amelia as unstable, financially insecure, emotionally reactive. He referenced her reclusive behavior, the lack of paternal acknowledgement for years, and the small-town, limited environment she was raising Ben in. Then came Daniel's turn. Marissa Kane stood, her voice steady. Yes, Amelia Hart left Seattle, she said, but she did so under duress, under manipulation, and she raised Ben with love, stability, and care without a penny from the Whitmores, without protection, without safety nets. She turned toward the bench. This isn't about money or last names. It's about what's best for a child. And we're here today because one woman believes she knows better than the people who love that child most. Daniel was called next. He stood, gaze steady. "When I saw my son for the first time," he began, "I didn't know who he was, but I felt something I can't explain, a connection, like something I'd been missing without realizing it." He paused, "And when I found out the truth, I was angry, not at Amelia, at the lies that kept me from knowing him. I don't care what name he carries. I care about his smile, his safety, his future." He looked directly at his mother. "And I won't let anyone take that from him. Not again." When Amelia took the stand, her voice shook at first, but then it grew stronger. "I didn't run because I wanted to. I left because I thought I had to, because someone I should have trusted told me Daniel didn't love me, that he wouldn't want a child, that I would ruin his life." Her eyes met Evelyn's no hatred, just defiance. "I chose to believe in myself instead. I built a life for my son, the best I could. And now that Daniel is here, he's not running either. We're both standing in front of you because we believe Ben deserves a family, not a power play." There was a silence in the courtroom when she stepped down. Even Evelyn didn't move. The judge asked for a brief recess. Daniel and Amelia stepped outside into the corridor, breaths shallow. "She's losing," Marissa said calmly, "and she knows it. But that makes her dangerous," Daniel murmured, as if on cue. Evelyn approached. Her voice was soft. "You two are making a mistake." Daniel stood between her and Amelia. "No, Mother, we're undoing one." Evelyn didn't blink. "You think this is over? You think one emotional testimony wins everything I think truth does?" he said. She turned to Amelia. "And what will you do when he gets tired? When his promises fade?" Amelia straightened. "I'll face that if it happens, but I won't live in fear anymore." Then came the twist, later that evening, as they returned home. Daniel's phone buzzed. It was Marissa. "There's something you need to see." An email, an attachment. It was an internal memo leaked anonymously from one of Evelyn's staff, a record of surveillance, bribes, a documented effort to block Amelia's communication to Daniel 3 years ago. Proof. Marissa's voice was grave. "We don't just have a defense now. We have leverage." Daniel stared at the screen, his throat dry, his past rewritten. She didn't just lie, he whispered. She orchestrated everything. That night, he sat in Ben's room, watching the boy sleep. A soft nightlight glowed near the bed. Ben breathed quietly, one hand curled around his favorite dinosaur. Amelia appeared in the doorway. Daniel stood, moving slowly to meet her in the hall. She didn't just keep us apart, he said. She built a wall and made sure neither of us saw the other side. Amelia nodded, eyes wide. So what do we do now? Daniel's jaw set. We tear it down. The next morning, Daniel Whitmore stood in front of the same brick courthouse, but this time his shoulders were squared, his stride deliberate. He had a folder in his hand. Inside it, the truth, emails, voice recordings, documented bank transfers, clear, undeniable proof of Evelyn Whitmore's calculated efforts to erase Amelia Hart from her son's life and to manipulate her own child's future like a chessboard under her control. Marissa Kane had reviewed it twice. We can take this to the press, to the judge, to the board of every company she's ever touched. This will burn everything. Daniel didn't blink, then let it burn. But he didn't go to the judge first. He went to Evelyn. She was in the courthouse lobby, dressed in crisp white, sipping coffee as if the world outside her didn't exist. When she saw him, her expression didn't change. Not yet. Daniel walked right up to her table and dropped the folder in front of her. She opened it without speaking. As she flipped through the pages, her face paled, her hands stiffened, her jaw clenched, and still she said nothing. Daniel sat across from her, voice calm. You took 3 years from me, from him, from her. Evelyn looked up slowly. You don't understand. Daniel, I did what needed to be done. You played God. I protected you. No, he said sharply. You controlled me. You erased someone I loved because she didn't fit your world. She would have ruined you. She saved me. Evelyn's lips pressed into a tight line. This changes nothing. Daniel leaned forward. It changes everything. He pushed the folder toward her. This goes to the judge in an hour. But first, you're going to withdraw your petition. Evelyn laughed, but it was brittle. Or would I make it public? He said, all of it. She stared at him. You'd destroy your own mother's name. I'd protect my son, he said without hesitation. The silence between them was absolute. Then Evelyn reached for her phone. An hour later, the court clerk received the official withdrawal. The custody review was dismissed. Amelia didn't believe it until Marissa walked into the waiting room, paperwork in hand, and said simply, "It's over." Amelia slumped into the chair beside Daniel, her breath shaking. She gave up, she whispered. She didn't have a choice, he said. Amelia looked at him, her eyes searching. What did you do? I told the truth. She smiled, small and tired. That's new. Daniel shrugged. Maybe I'm learning. They didn't celebrate. There was no champagne or cheers, just quiet, relief, a strange, unfamiliar calm. That night, Amelia cooked for the first time in days. Simple pasta, garlic bread. Ben sat at the table humming a song he'd made up. Daniel helped set the plates, his sleeves rolled, his mind still spinning. Over dinner, Ben asked if they could go to the zoo next weekend. Daniel said yes before Amelia could answer. She glanced at him. He shrugged. We'll figure it out. After Ben was in bed, Amelia found Daniel outside again, staring at the stars like they held the next chapter. She stood beside him. You didn't have to go that far, she said. Yes, he replied. I did. She's still your mother. Daniel nodded slowly. And he's my son. She didn't answer, but she moved a little closer, enough to say, I see you. Enough to say, thank you, and maybe, quietly, I'm not afraid anymore. Spring came early to Lakewood Ridge. The trees bloomed in soft blushes of green, and the sun spilled longer each day across the porch steps. Laughter returned to the house, not loud, not constant, but genuine. The kind of laughter that sneaks in between ordinary moments and lingers just long enough to heal something unspoken. Daniel Whitmore was no longer just a visitor. He was part of the rhythm now. Morning coffee with too much sugar because Ben insisted. Grocery trips that ended with impromptu picnics. The smell of Amelia's cinnamon bread in the oven and the faint sound of Ben's footsteps before sunrise. It wasn't perfect. There were still shadows, memories of fear, of absence, of what could have been. But now there was light to meet them. One Saturday morning, Daniel stood by the fence, hammer in hand, squinting at a loose board. Amelia came out with 2 mugs, barefoot on the dew-wet grass. "You know you could have called someone," she said, handing him coffee. "I like fixing things," he said. She raised an eyebrow. "Since when?" Daniel smiled. "Since I realized I'd broken a few too many." They stood together in the quiet. "Do you miss it?" she asked suddenly. "Seattle. The city." He thought for a moment. Sometimes the noise, the pace, but not the emptiness. She sipped her coffee. "You were always chasing something." "Yeah," he said. Turns out it wasn't out there. He looked at her, and there was something new in his eyes. Peace. Not because everything was easy, but because he wasn't running anymore. That night, Ben crawled into their bed during a thunderstorm. He snuggled between them, eyes wide. "Can we build a fort?" he asked. Daniel smiled. Now is the best time." Ben insisted. So they did. They dragged blankets across the chairs, set up pillows like battlements, and hid inside with a flashlight. Daniel held the light while Ben made up stories about knights and space dragons. Amelia laughed when Daniel got the villain's voice wrong. "Ben," Daniel whispered when the storm softened. "What do you think makes a home?" Ben thought very seriously, then said, "Warm pancakes, big hugs, and no yelling." Daniel looked at Amelia. "Well, 2 out of 3. We're doing okay." She smiled. Weeks passed. Daniel had his things brought quietly from Seattle, just what mattered. No suits, no awards, only books, his guitar, and a small painting Amelia once gave him during better days. They didn't talk about the court anymore, or Evelyn. She had disappeared from their lives, leaving behind only echoes. Daniel sometimes wondered if she ever regretted it, but he didn't let it stay long in his mind. Some wounds weren't meant to be reopened. One afternoon, Daniel sat with Ben under a tree in the yard. "Hey, buddy," he said, "do you remember when I showed up?" Ben nodded. "At the airport. Do you remember what you thought Ben scrunched his nose? I thought your shoes were shiny." Daniel laughed. "That's it. And I thought, you looked like me." Daniel's chest tightened. "I see myself in you every day." Ben leaned against him. "Are you going to stay forever?" Now Daniel wrapped an arm around him. "I'm not going anywhere." Ben nodded. "Good, because I like you in our fort." That evening, Amelia found Daniel on the porch, strumming his guitar softly, eyes on the fading horizon. She sat beside him, resting her head on his shoulder. "No more running," she said. "No more," he promised. They sat like that, letting the last of the light wash over them, and in that stillness without grand gestures or declarations or endings, they knew they were home, not a place, but in each other. There comes a time in life when we stop chasing success and start searching for meaning. This story reminds us that not all wounds are visible, and not all love stories follow a straight line. Sometimes the people we lose aren't gone. They're waiting silently for us to become brave enough to face the truth. It speaks to those of us who have loved deeply and lost painfully, to those who have built walls to protect themselves only to find that healing comes not in hiding, but in connection. We are never too old to forgive, to begin again, or to choose family over pride. The past cannot be rewritten, but it can be understood, and in understanding, we sometimes find the most precious thing of all, peace. So, if there's someone you've been afraid to reach out to, maybe today is the day to try. Because sometimes the hardest conversations lead us home. Thank you for sharing this journey with us. If this story touched your heart, reminded you of something lost or something worth fighting for, please take a moment to like, share, and subscribe to our channel. Your support helps us continue telling stories that heal, connect, and inspire. See you in the next story. With warmth from Shining Stories.